Welcome to Dr. Jaya's Virtual School, Amara Institute of Managerial Schools. We salute Amara and Krishna for their support and for their guidance. Written communication as effective communications. Reading skills. Reading skill is the receptive skill in the written mode. It can develop independently of listening and speaking skills, but with them,
especially in societies with a highly developed literary tradition. Reading can help build vocabulary that helps listening comprehension at the later stages particularly.
reading skills have many micro skills. The micro skills involved in reading are the most important aspects in reading. The reader has to decipher the script. In an alphabetic system or a syllabary, this means reading a relationship between sounds and symbols. In a pictograph system, it means associating the meaning of the words with written symbols. You should recognize the vocabulary. Pick out keywords such as those identifying topics and main ideas. Figure out the meaning of the words, including unfamiliar vocabulary, from the written context. Recognize grammatical word classes like noun, adjective. Detect sentence constituents such as subject, verb, object, and prepositions. Recognize the basic syntactic pattern. Reconstruct and infer situations, goals, and participants. Use both knowledge of the world and lexical, grammatical cohesive devices to make the foregoing inferences, predict outcomes, and infer links and connections among the parts of the text. Get the main point or the most important information. Distinguish the main idea from supporting details. Adjust reading strategies to different reading purposes, such as skimming for main ideas or studying in depth. Objectives of reading. To identify the necessity for varying your reading style to suit the purpose and difficulty of the assignment. To master the various reading styles through practice and to read critically.
Factors of reading. There are several different types of reading. The reading you do for studying is different from the reading you do for relaxation. The type of reading you do depends on the purpose of your reading. Your purpose for reading a comic book is different from your purpose for reading a science book. Because the purposes differ, you must adjust your reading style. A second factor in the type of reading you do is speed. Purpose determines speed, while reading rapidly is good for finding text. A third factor is the difficulty of the reading material. Purpose determines speed, but speed depends on the difficulty of the material. Even if raising pigeons is your hobby and you want to read a book about raising pigeons for pleasure, there may be many big words and long sentences to slow you down. You would have to adjust your speed. Studying requires special styles of reading.
Using different reading styles. Reading styles. There are a variety of different exams and situations that require an individual to prove his or her knowledge, and each individual will most likely to have to face some of these situations at some point. One of the best ways to prepare for any interview or an exam or other similar situation is by reading materials that are related to the particular subject of which the individual needs to prove his or her knowledge.
Studying requires special styles of reading. To determine which one is needed, you must consider the purpose and difficulty of the assignment. There are 5 basic styles of reading for studying: scanning, skimming, careful reading, reviewing, and critical reading. Scanning is looking rapidly down the page for a specific item. You can scan when you look up a name in the phone book or a word in the dictionary. When you scan, you are not concerned with the meaning of the whole page, but only with finding the item you want. Sometimes you try to scan a newspaper. Thus, you are not expected to remember anything else that was on the page. For this reason, scanning is used to gain information for temporary use. So, you can ask the class to observe while a volunteer looks up a word in a dictionary. Have volunteers describe how this type of reading differs from the type they use for looking over a book they might buy or for studying for a test. Elicit specific differences in various types of reading. Ask the students to bring a newspaper to class. Ask them to scan the front page and write the number of stories that appear. To find the answers, your eyes might have run quickly down the page from top to bottom or swept down the page in zigzag fashion. Regardless of the pattern used, you were doing what is called scanning.
Scanning is a method of reading a particular sentence, paragraph, passage, or character in which an individual is searching for specific facts related to a particular subject. An individual that is scanning a particular piece of written material is not actually reading the material very carefully, but is instead just searching the material for a particular piece of information very quickly. The individual, by allowing his or her eyes to scan over the material, or in other words, rapidly move back and forth over the material, can search for specific words that might be related to the information that the individual is attempting to find.
Learning to skim. Skimming is looking over a page or story to get a general idea of what it covers. Skimming is previewing. When you preview, you pick up important clues that help you. When you preview, you do several things. You get an overview or general idea of the story or article. You discover how easy or difficult the material is, and you discover which reading style is appropriate for understanding the material. You can ask the students to skim the lead article and write down the main idea from a newspaper. You can ask the students to read a storybook in the class and also ask them to take up the specific differences in various types of reading, such as eye movement, speed, purpose, and difficulty of material.
Use these techniques while skimming. Read the bold face heading, subheadings, and highlighted words. Look for keywords. There are two types, specific and general. Examine the pictures, maps, graphs and charts for an idea of the facts being presented. Read introduction. Ask yourself questions about what you have skimmed. Skimming is a method of reading a particular passage, chapter, or other large collection of sentences in order to determine the main idea of a particular piece of written material. An individual that is skimming a particular piece of written material is not actually reading the material very carefully, but is instead just searching for the main idea of each paragraph. The individual, by identifying the sentence in each paragraph that identifies the main idea of the paragraph and ignoring all of the other sentences in the paragraph that support the main idea, can get a quick idea of what the material is trying to say without reading all the material. The other styles are careful reading. Careful reading is understanding the exact details and how they fit together. Careful reading involves two basic skills: reading for main ideas, reading for details. When we read for main idea or central thought in a paragraph, the sentence in which you find the main idea is called the topic sentence. A paragraph is a group of sentences built around this main idea. Reading for details. Reading for details, the words and phrases that are suggested in the main idea or topic sentence. The details support the main idea. They give evidence that the main idea is true or acceptable. Reading for comprehension. Comprehension reading, also known as study reading, is a method of reading a particular passage, chapter, or entire written work several times very carefully so the individual can understand the material more effectively. An individual that is reading for comprehension by reading the material more slowly than the individual would normally read and or by reading the material aloud can often gain a better understanding of the material that the individual is having difficulty understanding. This style of reading is very different from scanning and skimming, as it is designed to help an individual understand the information that is covered by a particular piece of written material instead of finding specific key ideas or information in material. Reading strategies. Written materials that an individual may have to use to some point include almanacs, dictionaries, educational handouts, encyclopedia, flashcards, novels, practice exams, short stories, study guides, textbooks, theses, and a variety of other similar written resources. There are a variety of different strategies that an individual can use to read a particular piece of material. But it is important for an individual to find the best strategy for the type of resource the individual is using. It is also important to note that a reading strategy is not actually the same thing as a reading style. A change in reading style primarily refers to a change in the speed at which an individual reads, while a change in reading strategy refers to a change in the way that an individual studies the material. There are 12 strategies. The reading strategies usually help you to predict, visualize, question, connect, identify, infer, and evaluate. There are many strategies. First strategy let us discuss is REDW. One of the strategies that an individual can use to read and study a variety of different material is known as read, examine, decide and write. That is REDW. This strategy, a reading strategy, is primarily intended for reading materials that the individual is having difficulty understanding. As a result, REDW is usually used for textbooks or other materials that the individual cannot understand, even though the individual has attempted to understand the information by reading the material very slowly and carefully. The next strategy, reading strategy, is SQ3R, the most important reading strategy. One of the strategies that an individual can use to read and study a variety of different materials is known as survey, question, read, recite and review. This reading strategy is primarily intended for studying information that does not necessarily confuse the individual, but rather is just unfamiliar to the individual. In other words, SQ3R is usually used for textbooks that an individual is reading for the first time, so the individual knows that he or she will probably need to know the material that the textbook covers at some point, but he or she may not know exactly which material is important. There is another SQ3R where you can call it as survey, question, read, recall and review. Surveying the assignments, questioning the purpose, reading the assignment, reciting the lesson and reviewing the lesson too. The SQ3R is a study system, has these 5 steps: survey, question, read and recite and review. When we talk about SQ3R study system, the first thing becomes is survey. In survey, preview the article or chapter, study the title, a short summary, read the first and last paragraphs, look over headings and subheadings, explore the text by noticing italicized, bold printed sections, briefly review pictures, diagrams and paragraphs. Please answer the survey sincerely. Here is a questionnaire. Mark the answer. The questionnaire is whether you are a gender, female or male. Do you dance professionally or as a sport, as a hobby? You say yes, no, used to dance, or I would like to learn how to dance. Which style of dancing is more appealing to you? Modern types of dancing because of the cool extreme moves and the utilized unlimited possibilities of movement, or classic types of dancing because of the clean technique and the glorious costumes. So you can say I like both styles same way, or I like the movement of one style and the costumes of another. Do you think that the stereotype of dancing is for girls still exists? Say yes or no, or only for the modern styles of dancing such as hip hop and jazz, or only for the classic styles of dancing such as ballroom dancing and ballet. Do you believe that a dance can express and show real feelings or thoughts? Yes or no? Only for the modern styles of dancing? Only for the classic styles of dancing? Or you are uncomfortable with some styles of dancing? Yes, I am not comfortable with the extreme forms of this art, or yes, with too brutal modern styles, for example, brutal hip hop, or yes, with too close or old and mechanic classic style, or no, I am fine with all the different styles of this art. Which of the following describes best your perception of dancing? A hobby, an art, a profession, a sport? Do you think some styles will become irrelevant or even will disappear from the world? No, this art with its all different styles in internal, yes, this art will disappear completely, or yes, the classic ones, they are too limiting and old fashioned, or yes, the modern ones, they are too rebellious and raw. Do you see dancing as a sport? No or yes? Yes, only the modern styles of dancing, or yes, only the classic styles of dancing. What is your opinion will happen to dancing as a sport? Please explain. What is your opinion will happen to dancing as an art? Please explain. For such a survey question, you should use the important style of reading and also important strategy of reading. In the first, that is a survey. When we are making a survey, so it's like that survey we have to make is the first step. The second step is questioning. Convert the first finding in the selection into a question or a series of questions. For example, if the heading is the dances of India, you could make that into what are the dances of India. The next step is read. As you read, make up more questions. What is the main idea in this paragraph? What are the supporting examples? Then read to find the answers to your questions. The next step is recite. After completing a section of reading, look away and see if you can recite the answers to your questions. This will help you see exactly what you know and what you don't know. The last step is review. After you complete all the sections, review the entire selection. See if you can recite the answers to your questions. So here we have said SQ3R, but then there is another reading strategy called SQRW. One of the strategies that an individual can use to read and study a variety of different material is known as survey, question, read and write. This reading strategy is primarily intended to help an individual that notes chapter by chapter on information that the individual is reading for the first time, if he makes a note of it. As a result, SQRW is very similar to the SQ3R method and usually used for taking notes from textbooks. However, SQRW is sometimes more practical than the SQ3R method if the individual is attempting to study in a location where reciting information aloud may not be allowed, or the individual does not have enough time to use the complete SQ3R method. There is another SQRR method. That is, this is also SQ3R method, but in a little different way. There is no survey, it is skimming. Skim, question, read, respond, and then reread. There's a very nice reading strategy which we have to follow it when we hear somebody. This is called KWL. One of the strategies that an individual can use to read and study a variety of different material, especially if that individual is studying in a group setting, is known as known, want and learned, KWL. This reading strategy is primarily intended for a group of individuals, such as a study group, that is attempting to learn or understand a particular subject. The KWL method can be used for studying virtually any material, and it does not necessarily have to be used with a group, but it has found to be significantly more effective when used in a group. So you can use a KWL chart, an organizer, to help yourself, and this is very helpful not only in reading but also in listening and speaking. There is another chart also, KWHR chart where K means what I know, W means what I want to know, and H means how can I find the information, and L is what I learned. There are another chart called KWWL chart, that is what I know, what I want to know, where can I find what I want to know, and what I learned. Dear friends, there are many reading strategies. The most important strategy is SQ3R strategy and KWL strategy. There are other strategies called element mapping. There are a variety of different strategies that an individual can use to read a particular piece of material, but it is important for an individual to find the best strategy for the type of resource that the individual is using. There is a wide range of different written materials that an individual may have to use in order to study for an exam, interview, or other similar purpose, and each type of written material requires a different reading strategy in order to use that resource in the most effective way possible. One of the strategies that an individual can use if he or she is reading a novel, short story, or other work of fiction is known as element mapping. Element mapping is primarily used when an individual needs to break down a work of fiction into its component parts, especially if the individual is preparing to write a book report or a study for a literature exam, or this can be used even for dance. The next strategy, reading strategy, is question method. There are a variety of different strategies that an individual can use to read a particular piece of material, but it is important for an individual to find the best strategy for the type of resource that the individual is using. There is a wide range of different written materials that an individual may have to use in order to study for an exam, interview, or other similar purpose, and each type of written material requires a different reading strategy in order to use that resource in the most effective way possible. One of the different strategies that an individual can use is he or she is reading an essay, poem, short story, or other work is known as the question method. The question method, which can actually be used for any written material, whether the material is fictional or not, is primarily used for analyzing an essay or a chapter that the individual needs to understand the inner meaning of the essay or chapter, and not necessarily simply what the material is saying. Reading techniques. Reading techniques. Throughout your career as a student, you will be required to read a variety of texts and to gather material from them for assignments. Here are some guidelines for effective reading. Reading techniques: preview, question, take notes, summarize, review, and reflect. The areas of reading skill. You read for details, inference, cause and effect, decision making, main idea, sequence, understanding relationships, vocabulary, critical thinking and reading, problem solving. How to read for everyday living, reading skills. Reading and following directions on labels, reading menus, reading retails advertisement, reading help wanted ads, filling out job applications, reading and filling in forms for personal money management. So there is a reading solution skills list too. Reading comprehension, placement test also. Independent instructional and frustration levels in word and passage comprehension, accuracy in comprehension, quickly determined reading levels, accuracy in word identification, accuracy in comprehension quickly determine reading levels. So dear friends, let us know what is descriptive reading. Descriptive reading is understanding the importance of details, distinguishing between factual and fictional details, evaluating information to select the most important details, organizing details chronologically from a 2 or 3 step process, choosing between a word and an implied details, identifying several supporting details from a short reading, inference, understanding the meaning of an inferred idea, infer a specific outcome from a general account, identify an inferred synonym from a group of words, choose the correct inference from a table, list, or chart, distinguish between the words all and some to make an inference, evaluate information to select a negative inference. Reading for main idea. Understand what the main idea of a paragraph is. Select the main idea from a paragraph that includes several themes. Determine the main idea from reading a sequence of events or steps. Identify an appropriate title which serves as the main idea of a story. Choose the correct sentence that states the main idea of a paragraph. Fill in the exercise with a word or close exercise with a word that completes the main idea of a story. How do we read for sequence? Sequence reading is understanding what a sequence is, identifying a sequence from a sentence that uses time and order words such as before, after, last. Arrange the or more sentences in logical sequential order. Answer questions based on reading a sequence order in a paragraph. Assign numbers to order a sequence of events from items in a table, list, or chart. Select an appropriate title to name a story from reading a sequence of events. Vocabulary. Understand how to find out the meanings of new vocabulary words. Use synonyms as a learning device to figure out a new vocabulary word. Use antonyms as a learning device to figure out a vocabulary word. Select an appropriate vocabulary word in order to complete a cloze exercise. Identify a different meaning of a vocabulary word by comparing 3 sentences out of context. Interpret the meaning of a vocabulary word by examining contextual clues. Reading for fact and opinion. Understand that a fact is a true, accurate statement that can be proven. Understand that an opinion is a belief or a feeling about something. After reading a passage, distinguish between factual information and opinion statements. Decide whether a sentence out of context is factual piece of information. Decide whether a sentence out of context is an author's opinion. Use dates and events from a reading to identify factual information. We also read for comprehension. The reading comprehension skills are alliterations, author's purpose, cause and effect, compare and contrast, context clues, facts and opinions, hyperbole, idioms, figurative language, inferences, literary elements, ontopia, main idea, multiple meaning words, personification, point of view, sequencing, similes and metaphors, and summarizing. So, there are soft skills measured too, transferable skills, life skills, and social skills and self-esteem skills, and working in groups and teams. All these will put together for your reading skills. Reading micro skills competencies. There are 2, linguistic competency and pragmatic competency. In linguistic competency, you have orthography, grammar, vocabulary, and discourse. Pragmatic competency, we have functions, varieties, interactional skills, and cultural framework. In orthography, we have to continue expanding your recognition of characters, responding words, representing words you can understand if in a character system. To recognize archaic orthographies or spelling systems if in an alphabetic or syllabary system. To no longer be consciously aware of deciphering orthography, to read at normal speed. Vocabulary, to learn general vocabulary broad enough to enable you to read almost anything, including material on unfamiliar subjects. Discourse, procedural discourses, narratives, descriptions, personal and business letters, newspaper and magazine articles, novels, poetry, and other forms of literature. Functions, hypothesis, argumentation, and supported opinions. Appropriate varieties. Here is the most important thing to notice. Appropriate varieties. To notice when reading dialogue, how people talk to family friends, strangers, merchants, employees, and people of different ages and social status. To recognize grammatical forms and vocabulary that only occur in writing. To recognize when regional dialects or speech representative of different social classes is being reflected in dialogue. To recognize grammatical forms and usage appropriate to personal letters versus business letters. Interactional skills is to learn how people interact through the written form such as personal and business letters, to observe the interactional skills used in dialogue as found in short stories, plays, novels, and so forth. The most important aspect of reading here is a cultural framework. To learn more about how people interact with their environment, to learn more about different situations and groups of people within the society and how they relate to each other, to find out more about the values and beliefs of people, to learn more about the different stages of life and important life passages, to learn about symbolic culture represented in literature, to learn to match meaning derived from extra linguistic knowledge with that derived from knowledge of the language. So dear friends, there are many skills which we have to know in the industry for the professional, how you can incorporate it. It is like and we can use many of the other graphic organizers like aid, action, idea, details and explanations, like anticipation guide, like pick form. Pick form is put your purpose, idea and connected with what you already know, or have a CAR, QAR, that is question answer relationship. So, and also make a feedback of whatever you have read. You can make a feedback in a format or in a organizer where you can say role of the writer, role of audience, what is the format used, what is the topic, and how, and what reading style you have used, what reading strategy you have used, and what reading technique you have used. Thank you. Here is your friend of your communication, Dr. Jaya Venugopal.